to avoid some carnage from those blades. As you see some of the women's, Masters fours coming through the start line chute next to the BU boathouse. In particular, looking at that boat there, it looks like maybe it's a brown boat. I can almost see that face on the front of it. And it looks like their speed was a little bit fast relative to the boat in front of them. I don't know if they're going to have to let off the gas, but they certainly aren't going to be allowed to pass under that bridge. So again, we've talked about the various strategies coming through the start line chute. As you see, bow number 1, which is River City Rowing Club in this Women's Masters 4 event from West Sacramento, California.
I think we might run out of battery before the races are over.
Yeah, nice shot, and you can see clearly they have the preferred line because the folks sort of queuing up behind them want that at some point, which is what we're seeing now, the crew just to the left of them. At some point you'll need to decide you know, which path you want to take. If you are the faster crew, you have the right of way. By way of the Charles Law, if you will, right, by the rules. And so once you are within what they call one boat's length between you and the crew that you're moving on, then you are entitled to the right of way. And so we can't hear that now, but you know, oftentimes on the water you'll hear the coxswains, or if it's a coxless boat, the athletes shouting to each other to say, I'm moving on you, move to starboard or move to port, and then that way you can take your preferred line. Really interesting, though, to see those strategies unfold on this ever-winding river.
So these women coming from Sacramento, California, to be at our 2021 Head of the Charles Regatta. And they are starting with bow card 1. The winners and runner-up Marlowe Rowing Club and Lake Union from last year have not returned. And this crew from River City is certainly not doing anything other than justice to the bow card 1. I mean, just amazing course so far for the coxswain. Pretty much textbook where she was coming into the week's turn. Great week's turn. And setting herself up and her rowers to row just hopefully 4,702 meters, not a meter more, if she can continue to take her preferred line all the way down this thing.
Yeah, it's a really nice week's turn, and you can see that just by cutting the turn that way, she's managed to put one of the crews right on her tail a little bit further behind them, so we'll get a sense of exactly what those margins are as we pan out in a little bit. But it's worked for her. This is bow number 3 now, Western Reserve Rowing Association out of Cleveland, Ohio. Gold medalist crew at the Masters Nationals Open B event. So great to see them back together as they start their turn through Weeks Bridge.
It looks like I got nothing for a little bit. So what were you going to say?
A little bit easier to get through weeks in a Cox 4, but definitely a lot of skill, right? You still need to decide when to cut the turn. The boat's significantly shorter than an 8, but still takes a lot of focus and skill to get through it.
So I think that's actually a shot of the next event, which is the Women's Alumni Fours, because it looks like a bow card 3. They're coming fast and furious at us here, Colleen. That's University of Rhode Island, I believe, with a bow card 3 in that next event, which is event 33, again, the Women's Alumni Fours. There's only 13 boats in the Women's Masters Fours and then 15 in the Women's Alumni Fours. So it's not a huge surprise that they're kind of moving through both events relatively quickly.
And here comes Radcliffe, bow number 6. So we're back now in the Women's Masters 4s 40 plus. You see that coxswain sitting up. She knows the line that she wants. She knows this river, right? Presumably coming from Radcliffe. And then bow number 5, Carolina Masters Crew Club, from her standpoint, in her way. So you can see this is that communication and that sort of shouting that's required in this race to make sure that you get the line that you want if you're the faster crew, which we can see currently. It's appearing like she is, but she'll need to ask her crew for gas to continue to have the right to take that water. And David, it's looking like Carolina Masters Crew Club has a bit of an answer for her.
Without question in terms of speed. So Carolina's answer was, hey, we're going to move out and we're going to try to keep ourselves from being adjudicated as somebody who didn't give the line or yield like we're supposed to under the rules. One of the things that actually is kind of a savvy move in my mind from the Radcliffe coxswain is that she sat up. So it's the officials on the shore can see that she is actively trying to do something in order to get that line, in order to have the rules function the way that they're supposed to function. if she was still laying down and yelling from her laying down position, she may not have sort of done anything physically to show the officials that she's looking for that space or looking for that yield to happen. As you see, bow 11 coming through Weeks, River City from Sacramento.
And a great look then at bows 8 and 10 as they come through.
Yeah, it's Sammamish, bow 10, and then San Diego right behind them, bow 8. Sammamish being one of those clubs that they will just keep their uniforms consistent throughout the different crews, which is a great help to us with their navy white sash and then red uniforms coming from Seattle, Washington area.
Yeah, nice look for them. Clean, clear water.
That looks to me like Minneapolis, about 7, and they have passed through Anderson, looking for their line on that big turn. And if you can see, if those are unofficial times, but it looks like they're doing well relative to their bow number. Their bow card being 7, sitting in 5th place at the last checkpoint.
So women's masters for 40+ age category with some women's alumni fours on the course as well, closer to the start. So you can see this shell from Minneapolis picking up the big turn here. All of these crews setting themselves up, well, most of them, not all of them, trying to get the inside line, the favorable position. That's exactly Minneapolis with a nice point, looking to do just that. We'll see if they are moving faster than the shell. It looks like potentially in front of them, then they'll have that right of way. The shell in front of them potentially already starting to yield by design or by coincidence.
Yeah, very interesting actually, even just above them in our picture. Just some of these lines coming in. Got a couple boats wide there and side by side as they try to come around. That's really the kind of the apex of the turn is also the hardest part of that turn. It is where you really have to go pretty hard to port, and you're seeing those boats do that now from that vantage point. Really great camera shot all the way back. The camera's on the top of the Anderson Bridge, and we're getting it all the way down there to the apex of the big turn, or the start of the big turn.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hard left-hand turn that this Minneapolis Rowing Club shell will have to make. So to your point, David, this is a place where you'd start asking for more pressure on the starboard side to start to pull you in a little bit tighter to port, or maybe have your port side lighten up. Ideally, you're not having anyone lighten up for these 3 full miles, but if you need to pull some of those tricks out of your bag to make the turns work for you, then that's what you have to do. Just behind them, though, we can see a little bit of a battle happening for the inside. We'll get a look at bow cards in just a moment.
Yeah, it's San Diego and Sammamish there. As you see bow card 1 coming through, that's River City. They have finished the big turn, and they're going to come through Elliott with, I think, still nobody in front of them. Looking up at the timing from the Weld Boathouse, they were ahead by a second.
Really long stroke, and that's part of what's making this rhythm really work well for them. So no doubt there's power, but you can see the legs coming down together, good length into the back half, what's called the finish. And it's just working nicely for them. Now we're seeing from the back, you can see the blades coming in, clean catch, clean entrance to the water at the same time. And they'll look to hold off the crews behind them. And it's looking like they're in a good position to do that, but they'll need to keep the pressure on.
It does, and another nice line as we see the buoys come into the picture. Nice tight line on those green buoys as they make that final just slight turn, and then they will start, the coxswain will see that finish line.
Yeah, job well done to her as she gets her hull just on the other side of that green buoy to cut the starboard turn as close as possible. They're going to be hard to beat, I think.
Yeah, there used to be a buoy right there, Colleen, back the many years ago that I coxed this regatta. There was a buoy, there was one more buoy, I think, that was near where that outcropping is. And oftentimes people were missing that one because it came out a little bit, and if they held that one so tight and they're trying to go really along the shore, that one would be cut or missed. As you see, the next crew come, I think that's Greenwich crew.
You know, part of it might be too that the depth is actually okay there. So at Coxton College at Northeastern University, so this is my home water, and you're okay to get really tight. They might have decided they just didn't need it.
Oh,
That's a little bit
little tight.
hairy.
May have missed one buoy, but I think just got on the correct side of the next one. Is this bow card 4 Conibear Rowing Club from Seattle, Washington. Hate to verbalize it, but I can guarantee the officials were right on top of that, so I don't think they're listening to our broadcast anyway. And that's Radcliffe ahead of Carolina Masters. So Radcliffe did get past Carolina
exactly.
Masters.
Right around the powerhouse stretch, for those who were tuning in at the time, we saw those crews having a bit of their own kind of private battle, and indeed looks like Radcliffe has pushed ahead. We see bow number 3, then that's Western Reserve Rowing, again gold medalist crew at Masters Nationals Open in the B event just behind them. So they've been overtaken by Radcliffe and Carolina.
So bow number 1, River City Rowing Club. They started first in this event. They will finish first across the line at least.
Looking so solid, good power, really nice look at that crew and their technique. Again, this is the very last stretch of the race. They're exhausted. They've worked hard for nearly 3 miles, and they just need to get to the line.
Sacramento, California being the location of one of the premier rowing venues in the country for straight line rowing.
Ooh, and look at this. Tight turns, well done to bow number 11, who's been able to hold on to that.
Yeah, bow 11, also River City. So both of those coxswains pretty proficient on this river. What, 3,000 or 4,000 miles away from home. And they're staying ahead of the boat from San Diego. And then I think Sammamish continues to be just behind San Diego.
And love that we're able to get so close with these cameras this year. Once again, we have 9 cameras across the course. We're able to pick up times from those 4 timing points. That's the graphic that you see in the top right. And this is Sammamish Rowing Association rowing toward us. Bow number 10, Sammamish.
Sammamish out of Redmond, Washington.
Coming through their final right-hand turn.
And so this is the Women's Masters 4s finishing up in the last 1/5 of this race course here in Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, the 2021 Head of the Charles Regatta. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is David Wyant. I am here with my broadcast partner for this stretch of racing, Colleen Seville. As you see, bow card 3, Western Reserve out of Cleveland, Ohio. They are going to finish their race into the last 5 or so strokes to the line. And you can see all the spectators even hanging their legs over the dock right at the finish line.
And a good look then as they come through Western Reserve Rowing Association out of Cleveland. And these are quite the oars.
Yeah, that's Middlebury. It stands out, and that's the next event, which is the Women's Alumni 4s. I think if we got a picture, that would be about 10, Middlebury College. And it's the class of 2020, so it is the class that missed out on rowing in their senior years, but they're out here on the Charles, rowing at the head of the Charles.
Picking up the long turn and into certainly the last mile, a little bit less than about 3/4 of a mile to go.
That's bow 13 of the Women's Masters 4s. That's Burnt Hills Rowing Association. And it's the first head of the Charles for 3 out of 4 of the rowers.
Burnt Hills, an upstate New York neighbor to Saratoga Springs. You see sometimes some overlap between those two teams.
You see Sammamish on the right side, getting into their final strokes. In the women's Masters fours category, at least average age of 40 years of age or older.
And a good look at Sammamish. Full crew coming through the line.